Hello students, welcome to our YouTube channel Academia Ambala. I am Mrs. Shashee Sharma. Today we'll do a chapter from the book Beehive, and the name of the chapter is My Childhood by A.P.J. Abdul Kalam. Abdul Kalam's biography is titled Wings of Fire, and the chapter My Childhood talks about the childhood of our President A.P.J. Abdul Kalam. He was the President of India and a great scientist too. In this chapter, Mr. President talks about his upbringing, his parents, and siblings. He tells us about his friends and all those things that influenced his childhood. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam was born into a middle-class Tamil family, and his place of birth, Rameshwaram, is an island town in the state of Tamil Nadu in the Bay of Bengal. Today we know the state as Tamil Nadu, but when he was born, at that time the state was known as Madras State. My father, Jalaluddin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth, but despite these advantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. And he had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiamma. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of her own family put together. Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam was one of many children. He was short with rather undistinguished looks, and his parents were tall and handsome. He lived in the ancestral house, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a pakka house made up of limestone and brick on the Moss Street in Rameshwaram. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam's father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. However, all the necessities in terms of food, medicine, and clothes, they were provided to the children. Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam had a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. For reasons which Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam had never been able to understand, there was a sudden rise of demand for the tamarind seeds, and he used to collect those seeds and sell them to the provision shops on the Moss Street. And a day's collection would fetch him a sum of 1 anna. Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam's brother-in-law, Jalaluddin, would tell him stories about the war, which he would later attempt to trace in the headlines of the newspaper Dinamani. The area was isolated where Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam stayed, and it was quite unaffected by war. But soon, because India was forced to join the Allied forces and a state of emergency was declared. The first casualty came in the form of the suspension of the train halt at Rameshwaram station. The newspapers had now to be bundled and thrown out from the moving train on the Rameshwaram road. That forced his cousin Samsuddin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for somebody to help him cash the bundles, and Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam very naturally filled the slot. His cousin Samsuddin helped him earn his first wages, and half a century later, he can still feel the surge of pride in earning his own money for the first time. Now, this forced his cousin Samsuddin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for a certain kind of a helping hand. Now, every child is born with some or the other inherited characteristics into a specific socioeconomic and emotional environment, and also trained in certain ways by figures of authority. Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam says that he inherited honesty and self-discipline from his father, and from his mother he inherited faith in goodness and deep kindness, and along with his three brothers and sisters. Now, Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam had three very close friends, Ramanand Shastri, Arvindam, and Shiva Prakasam. All these three boys belonged to Orthodox Hindu Brahmin families. And there was no difference between them. There was no religious differences and upbringing. In fact, Ramanand Shastri, who was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, who was the high priest of Rameshwaram temple. Later he took over the priesthood of the Rameshwaram temple from his father. Then Arvindam went into the business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims, and Shiva Prakasham became a catering contractor. During the annual Shri Sita Ram Kalyanam ceremony, the family used to arrange boats with special platform for carrying the idols of Lord from the temple to the marriage site, which was situated in the middle of the pond called Ram Tirth, which was near their house. Events from the Ramayana and from the life of the Prophet were the bedtime stories which were told by his mother and grandmother to the children in the family. Now, when Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam was in 5th standard, a new teacher came there. He used to wear a cap which marked him as a Muslim. And he also sat in the front row next to Ramanand Shastri, who wore the sacred thread. Here I am talking about APJ Abdul Kalam and his friend Ramanand Shastri. Now, the new teacher could not digest the fact that Hindu priest's son was sitting with a Muslim boy. So, in accordance with the social ranking, as the new teacher saw it, he asked APJ Abdul Kalam to go and sit on the backbench. So, he was very sad, and so was his friend Ramanand Shastri. He looked utterly downcast, and as Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam was shifted to the back. After school, both of them went home and told their respective parents. Ramanand Shastri summoned the teacher and in their presence told the teacher that he should not spread the poison of social inequality and communal intolerance in the minds of the innocent young children. He also very bluntly asked the teacher to either apologize or quit the school and the island. Not only the teacher regret his behavior, but the strong sense of conviction Lakshmana Shastri conveyed ultimately also reformed the young teacher. On the whole, the small society of Rameshwaram was a very rigid in terms of segregation of the small social groups. However, his science teacher Shiva Subramanya Iyer was also a very orthodox Brahmin. He did his best to break social barriers so that people from varying backgrounds could mix with one another. And he would spend many hours with Mr. APJ and tell him that he wanted him to develop so that he would be on par with the highly educated people of the big cities. Now, one day, his teacher, science teacher, invited him to his home for a meal. His wife was very, very horrified at the idea of a Muslim boy being served a meal in their house and in their kitchen. She refused to serve him food in the kitchen, but Shiva Subramaniam Iyer was not disturbed at all. He did not get angry with his wife, but instead he served him with his own hands and sat down beside him. His wife watched from behind the kitchen door and wondered if she had observed any differences in the way that Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam ate or drank water or cleaned the floor after the meal. Now, when Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam was leaving the house, Shiva Subramaniam invited him again for dinner the next weekend. Observing his hesitation, he told him not to get upset and said, Once you decide to change the system, such problems have to be confronted. Now, the next time when Mr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam visited the science teacher's house, Ayer's wife took him inside and served him food with her own hands. Then, as luck would have it, Second World broke out, and when it was over and India's freedom was imminent, Indians will build their own India, declared Gandhiji. The whole country was filled with optimism. I asked my father for permission to leave Rameshwaram and study at the district headquarters in Ramanathapuram. Father told him, Abul, I know you have to go away to grow. Does the seagull not fly across the sun alone and without a nest? He quoted Khalil Gibran to his hesitant mother. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. Thank you.